Checking another box here on the show as far as dream guests go. Really excited today to welcome EJ Snyder from Bootleg Football. You've seen Brett Coleman on the show before. Brett was able to put me in touch with EJ. I always love his perspective, love listening to his content whenever he's either on Bootleg Football or guesting on another podcast. I've heard him on with the SEAHAWKS boys before, but also this. Even though he's a Bears fan, does a Bears podcast also, he has spent most of his life here in the Pacific Northwest and has always kind of kept a side eye on the Seahawks. So I'm looking forward to getting his insight and analysis on what he sees from this team so far this year. We're going to focus mostly on the defense with him because we've all had our spotlight shined so brightly on the offense throughout all of OTAs and training camp, and we like what we see there. Are we taking the defense for granted? Are we not talking about them enough? And when we do, are we talking about them in the right way? You'll see what I mean coming up next. EJ Snyder joins me on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Hit that like button for this video if you're watching it on YouTube. Also subscribe to the channel, closing in on 11,000 subs. And if you want to be notified of future content, hit that bell. That's what that's for, right down below. If you prefer audio, we're on all the platforms. Be sure to follow or subscribe there and leave a rating or a review if you like what you hear. Same here. Comment down below as we get into this conversation. Engagement with the channel is the best way you can help support me as an independent full-time content creator, and it doesn't cost you a thing. All the other ways that you can support me, including my Substack for the written word or my Patreon for exclusive content, including our Seahawks Film Lab coming up starting in a couple of days. That'll be a weekly segment with Bryce Coots. Be leaning into his experience as an offensive coordinator and quarterback coach as we break down all 22 tape. That's over on Patreon. Check that out. All the other ways that you can support me are listed and linked down below in the description as well. Let's get to this. This is EJ Snyder from Bootleg Football speaking with me earlier today. Enjoy. EJ, it's great to have you here. I have long been an admirer of Bootleg Football. I've had your partner Brett on the show. Really great to have you. How you doing, my friend?
I'm fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity. It's always fun to talk Hawks. They are my backyard team, if not my favorite fan loyalty. I really enjoy the organization, and they've been a fun watch.
Now, that's a poorly kept secret that we were just chatting before I hit record, that you live in this area and have for most of your life. But you're a Bears fan. You do a Bears podcast also. But just to get that out there, a little disclaimer for Seahawk fans that I understand the challenges of trying to analyze the entire league. It's a lot of work. It's more heavy lifting than I'm capable of. But you guys do a wonderful job. But you do have a little bit of a soft spot for the Seahawks, and so I want to take advantage of that here today.
Oh, for sure. Again, a fascinating team. And you don't necessarily have to be good for me to like you in the NFL, but you do have to be interesting. And the Hawks have been both, and I think are primed to be both this year. And that makes it easy.
Yeah. We're going to mostly focus on the defense here because I think the offense has stolen a lot of the spotlight, and deservingly so during this offseason with all the changes. And that's kind of where people are tying their expectations to how this team is going to do. Is it really rests on the success or failure of the offense. But I do want to get your thoughts there as well. And here's where I want to start. I was refamiliarizing myself with your Seahawks preview that you and Brett did about a month ago. And it reminded me of this little ditty that you came up with. This is you on the Seahawks offensive line after Brett explained their 41% pressure rate on true dropback sets last year. They're not just terrible. They're literally the worst in the league. How are you feeling about what you're seeing on the field now with obvious disclaimers about it being preseason and not real bullets?
Much better. And when people ask me, as they often do, like, hey, if you were the Seahawks brain trust, who would you be drafting? And at that time, I said Gray Zabel. I said, I don't think they're going to do it. But if it was me, given what happened last year and what's available in this first year or in this first round of the draft this year, Gray Zabel would be my choice for multiple reasons. I hope they do it. But as you know, oftentimes that, just wildly varies from what NFL front offices actually do, because we get a very different picture than they do. When that actually happened, I was like, they're on their way. I've been an Olu supporter since his draft, hoped he was going to be able to work into a starting role. Again, if Abe's healthy, Charles Cross has been up and down, but there, I think, has been more up than down. It is a solid tackle tandem. And the bottom line is, it would be very hard to be worse. It would be near impossible to be worse. If you were anywhere in the Hawks neighborhood with offensive line rankings last year, it was a very bad place to be. It was a rough neighborhood. So even if they only improve 10 or 15 spots to get to the middle of the league, it would be a massive improvement. And really, that has to happen with Darnold back there as quarterback, because he is not Geno when it comes to dealing with pressure.
Now, you said you're an Olu fan, and I have been too. Ever since he was drafted, I have said, this has been my little thumbnail on him, I think he's a guy that can start for 10 years in this league and never make a Pro Bowl. And there's tremendous value in that kind of a player. I think Jaylen Sundell, and I felt this way since the first time I laid eyes on him, has a higher ceiling. Have you seen enough of Sundell with Olu being out to think that he deserves the starting center spot, if that's indeed the way it goes?
If they play steady football, it is very difficult to change your center midstream. And quarterbacks get used to it. They get used to cadences. Obviously, offensive line is a team within a team on every team, and they have to play together. And understanding how a guy is going to react that is in the middle of the line. It's not like a tackle out on the edge where he's got, I'm not going to say less responsibilities, but very different responsibilities. In the middle, you have multiple responsibilities on every play, run or pass, and everybody does it a little bit differently. There is a rhythm to offensive line play, and if this offensive line hits a rhythm with Jaylen Sundell, it's going to be very tough for the coaches to pull the trigger and say, hey, we think Olu, whatever, maybe has a little bit higher ceiling, or however that goes, and pull the trigger. Coaches are not, they don't want to do that. They just don't. They don't want to mess with it if it's working. So if it's working with Jaylen Sundell and they are getting, again, even average performance from this offensive line, I would imagine he stays the starter. Just changing horses midstream, especially at the center position, is very difficult.
It's interesting that you're a Bears fan, because two teams that went about attacking their offensive line issues this offseason very different ways. The Seahawks leaning into their youth and even adding to it with the ZELLE pick, but focusing more on scheme and continuity, whereas the Bears just blew up their interior offensive line, went out and spent a bunch of draft picks and money on adding veterans. News yesterday that the Seahawks are having Dalton Risner in for a visit, a guy who's got some familiarity with Clint Kubiak and Justin Outten. But interesting timing, in that we've all been talking here for the last 2 weeks about how we might be seeing the best version of Anthony Bradford, and how he's kind of won that right guard spot and looked deserving of it. But it's such a young group. Josh Jones, their backup swing tackle, 28 years old, the oldest guy in that group. Almost everyone on the roster in that room is on their rookie contract. Do you think, even if he's just being brought in for depth, do you think it's important to add a little bit of experience to that group?
I don't know so much about experience, because, again, they are all coming together in a new offensive system. So everybody's new. And you hear this from veterans when a team changes systems, and especially offensive coordinators or offensive line coaches or both. Hey, it's new for us too. It's new for the rookies. It's new for us. We're learning a new system. Everybody's having to come up to speed together. And it really is, it keeps coming back to the togetherness, right? The offensive line has to play together. Dalton Risner, very experienced player, very solid player. And even if he is swing depth, that's a good thing, because injuries have subbed the Seahawks offensive line performance for a couple of years now, much like my team, the Bears.
In particular, yeah, he's gotten dinged up both times he's won the start.
So having a guy like that has a lot of starts under his belt, has a lot of experience, is a physically capable player. Look, he's not a top of the line starter, but that doesn't matter. He's also not a bottom of the line starter, which is what you want to avoid. You want the best five, and you want, again, no weak links. Dalton Risner can very much hold up his end of the bargain in not being the weak link. So even if it's just for depth, whether or not you're looking at the leadership piece of it, like experience depth on the offensive line, it's tough to get it in this league. And if you can, and they see that as a fit, I would see that as a quality signing.
I could talk to you for an hour about offense, but we've been doing that for the last month. And so I really want to flip over to the other side of the ball. And here's how I want to approach it from the top. It seems, and I'm guilty of this too, as we project what this team might be this year, with all the focus kind of being on the offense. Are we taking the defense for granted? I mean, 15 guys back who started games. I think it's 9 players that played 300 snaps or more on defense. Like, as much continuity on that side of the ball as you're going to find anywhere in the league. And not just continuity, but success. The last 7 games last year, top 5 in just about every key marker on defense. But are we just taking that for granted? Is this defense where you'd like to see it? Or do they still need to either advance a step, or do they need to add?
It's a great question. And I think folks are taking the defense for granted. And I'm going to go a step further and say, I think that's actually okay in this particular setup. You've got one of the brightest defensive minds in the league as your young head coach, who showed tremendous growth in his first season with the defense. Again, you talked about from the beginning of the season, and a lot of that was injury based, which subbed out the pass rush. But when they came together, when they gelled in the back half of the season, this defense was incredibly effective, as you alluded to. Top 10 in just about everything, top 5 in a bunch of things. They have continuity, they've added to it, and in any second year of either a coordinator or a head coach, in this particular case, coming in and putting their system into place, we see an increase. We saw it in Baltimore when Mike Mack was there. Whenever you get your second year with the players, you start with a whole bunch of shorthand from the first year. We don't have to cover all that in installs. The same as we were doing it last year, but here's what we're going to add. Here's the wrinkles. Here's the things we're going to do to be even more effective. So I think people might be sort of thinking it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to get better, but I also think that's completely warranted in this particular case. So yes and yes.
And that's why I asked the question. We have been talking for years around here about lack of blue chip players. A lot of young players that we like, right? On my latest 53-man roster projection that I'm working on unveiling after the Green Bay game, I think I had 35 of the 53 are on their rookie contracts, still their original rookie contracts for Seattle. ESPN ranked their under 25 or 25 and under group of players second best in the league. And yet, just today, the New York Times comes out with their annual ranking of the 25 best players in the league that are 25 and under. And there's no Seahawk from that group listed. So the second best group overall by one ranking, not a single individual good enough to be ranked even in honorable mention on the top 25. Does this group still lack blue chip players?
Oh, it's a good question. Blue chip is such a touchy designation. Depends on
the way I look at it, players that cause problems, players you have to game plan for, players that you can game plan for and will still beat you.
Yeah. And if that is if that elite slice of the NFL, because that people think everybody in the NFL is that way. Everybody in the NFL is a great football player. And I mean, everybody, the people in the practice squads are the best football player you have ever met. And they're still not cracking a starting lineup. When you really talk about the cream rising to the top, you talk about the Myles Garretts of the world who, all these other great players just look at and go, yeah, whatever. Can't block him. Like I'm the best offensive lineman I know. And I've got nothing against this guy. There aren't a ton of those on the Hawks right now. But there are a lot of players who are being maximized within the system who are right below that. So if you're talking about top 10 at your position in the NFL, there's not that many players on the Hawks that I would list, if any, maybe on defense right now. But the sort of slice right underneath that, which is the majority of the really good players in the league, I'd say there's a lot of them. And those guys fly under the radar a little bit because, again, we are so focused on lists and top 5 and top 10 and, top 30 under 25. Like these are very thin slices that, yeah, you might be able to get left off that list. But if you extended those lists another 10, you might see 2 or 3 on there. So overall, the talent level is incredibly young. That means it's very inexpensive. That's a competitive advantage in the NFL. And they're very good too. We're not talking about a bunch of cheap has-been guys that we're just patching it together with who are, scrappy and playing above their level. We're talking about very talented players who might not be at that very top crust that are, on the minds of, let's say, fans that aren't fans of the Seahawks. But there are a ton of very good players who are good system fits as well. And that means as much as anything in the modern NFL.
Of those guys in that next slice, as you call it, who's the closest to kind of exploding on the scene to where next year when we see all these lists closer to the top?
Yeah, I mean, I've said Leonard Williams forever, like since he was drafted. Like the Bears are very close to drafting Leonard Williams, and I wish they had. But ever since then, I've been a Leonard Williams fan, and I think he's been the best version of himself in Seattle, and really a leader on this defense. Now a veteran leader, one of the quote unquote old guys on this defense. Right. But it's probably Byron Murphy. I mean, I think the Hawks hope it's Byron Murphy. If Byron Murphy explodes in the way that they wanted him to when they drafted him, where they drafted him, he would be the guy carrying it forward as the, flashy interior guy that can create pass rush in the NFL, which is a very valuable and rare skill set. That's why they drafted him. That's what they want him to do. He showed flashes of that. Again, he struggled with injury last year, but if he has a full healthy season and becomes really the Batman to Leonard Williams's Batman, right? We're not talking about Batman and Robin here. You need two Batmans on the offensive line. If he becomes that and ascends to that level for the Hawks, I think that's sort of the best case scenario for that defense.
And how important then is his role to him making that step? You guys talked on your Seahawks preview about him having to play a little too much nose tackle last year, which he did a capable job of, but that's not where they want him. And even this offseason, he was excited to tell us that the team wants him to play more 3 technique. I think we all want that for him. They re-signed Jonathan Hankins right after the draft. We've yet to see him yet. He hasn't shown up in Seattle, still battling a back issue that 3 weeks ago wasn't a big deal and now hasn't gotten any better. In the meantime, we've seen some pretty good things from Quinton Bohanna and Brandon Peely, a pair of 26-year-olds that aren't necessarily your traditional nose tackles, run stuffers. They can do a little bit more than that. They're a little more athletic, but they fit that 335-pound build. Have you seen enough of those guys to feel comfortable that you can put Byron Murphy where he can best succeed?
I think can is a thing, but I'm drawn to the old phrase betwixt and between. They want to get their best 11 on the field, and Byron Murphy is clearly their best 11. And the guys you mentioned are, I would say, outside that. Now, role specifically, they might be. And that's a sort of cognitive dissonance with a coach, right? This guy's not necessarily in his best role at nose tackle, talking about Murphy. But if I play him there, then I've got other players that are better. And if we're talking about the whole force of 11, which is a big deal with Mike Mack, because when you look at, pass rushers in Baltimore, which is where he came from, you have a lot of guys that play specific roles who, again, are not necessarily of that star tier. They did have star tier pass rushers, but not all over the line. And it was about 11 guys playing together and playing to their specific role. So it's that, like, hey, I think his best role might be at 3 tech. That's where we all want to see him to really unleash that pass rush ability, which is rare. That's why we drafted him up high. But if we put him at nose tackle because of the Hankins injury or whatever else, maybe we get then again, better pass rusher on the other side than Bohanna would be at nose tackle. So it's that balance of I'd love to, but I'm not sure I can, which is why I would love to see John Schneider invest in the 5th or 6th round when those guys are available, those absolute stumps of defensive tackles who are just there to plug the run. Those guys are always there. And it's a value. It's not a sexy pick, but it plays a very important role in the defense. And the Ravens did that as well. So I could see the Hawks doing it. I really thought Hankins, like everybody else did, was probably their answer to that question. When we go heavy, who's going at nose? We don't want it to be Byron. But he might be forced into that nose role more than we would like early in the season until they can get healthy or find a guy to ascend who really can truly be part of their best 11.
Yeah, it still feels like at the cut to 53, they're going to be combing that list pretty hard. Maybe finding.
I think they should be for sure.
There, yeah, because you can find those guys on that cut sometimes.
Agreed.
Yeah. Let's talk about the corners because they've been, well, Reek more so than Devin Witherspoon have been a little polarizing in their careers. Reek started his career looking like a future All-Pro and then had some setbacks his second year. Now people question his upside and whether or not he's worthy of the big contract extension. Devin Witherspoon's an interesting case, universally respected around the league. He shows up on some of those top 10 lists of best young corners in the league, and yet the ball production hasn't been there. Just the one interception in his third game as a pro, the 92-yard pick six against the Giants on national TV, hasn't picked off a ball since. Do you need to see that from him?
I think if you're waiting for it, you're sort of hoping against hope. It would be nice for sure. Everybody wants that, but he makes impact in a lot of other ways, especially within the role that Mike Max put him into. And this is nothing new for Witherspoon. He had 5 picks in 4 years in college. He had 2 years with none. He had a year with 2 and a year with 3. So he has never been, in terms of interceptions, one of those guys that was, grabbing the ball for your offense and giving it back. Now, PBUs, different story. He gets his hand on the ball a lot. His ball production comes from that side. I'd like to see some of the other stats when we really talk about impact sort of come back up. I would like to see sacks rebound to his rookie year level. I'd like to see QB hits rebound to his rookie year level. That's only about 4 apiece. But if you're talking about 8 of those from a nickel rusher, typically that's pretty good production. And the 16 passes defended, I want that to go back up to that level. He slipped a little bit from that in his second year. It'd also be nice to see the number of stops keep climbing, because the reality is, if you are a nickel or force player, you are a run fit player in the NFL. That is the new base defense. And, he had just over 30 his first year, like 35, 36 last year. I'd like to see that keep climbing to about 35 or 40. That means he's a piece that's really contributing in a lot of ways, a very well-rounded player. Again, not the sexiest ways. It's like pass rushers that don't necessarily get sacks, right? Pass rushers that get a lot of pressure, who stir the drink, who collapse the pocket, but don't necessarily finish. People go, oh, he only had 6 sacks. He's not a good rusher. And you're like, oh, you're not watching the tape. That guy's messing up offenses. And it's the same for Devin Witherspoon. He is very versatile. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's tough. He can go forward, he can go backwards, and very effectively. But people, oh, he doesn't get interceptions. And you're like, well, he never did, but he does a lot of other things: stops, interceptions, quarterback hits, pressures. Again, has the respect of his peers around the league. And I would just like to see him sort of level back out to his rookie year, which was better than his sophomore season.
Where do you land on Reek Woolen? Eligible for a contract extension doesn't look like it's coming. I think they want to see one more year out of him. There's risk in that. Obviously, he has a year he did as a rookie. He's going to go up in cost, but where do you land on his upside?
The upside's amazing. I was at his debut when they played the Broncos in Lumen Field, and he frustrated the piss out of Cortland Sutton, who's a player I really like, who just got a big contract extension.
Mm-hmm.
And Reek, as a very raw rookie, basically said, nah, you're not going to do anything tonight. And Cortland Sutton was like, you're a rookie. And by the end of the game, he was like, damn,
you're a rookie wearing fluorescent green.
Yeah, this is tough going. And we all thought, as we always do, we all fall into the trap. The progression is linear. He's just going to get better. He's just going to build from where he was. And he didn't. He fell off. And I think the Hawks are probably wise to hold their money on this one. And, either that or sign him for a discount. And if you're the player, you're betting on yourself. You probably won't take that. You're saying, hey, I'll give myself the season. I'll bet on myself. I'll see if I can push it up the board again, get back to those heights I hit as a rookie. And if he does, then the Hawks are out money and it's expensive, but presumably in their minds, it's worth it. Has been a bit of a roller coaster. Was a player I really liked coming out in the draft. He was somebody that I highlighted on our defensive gem series. At that point, he was not particularly well known. And I said, look, if this guy does 3 or 4 things, he's going to be top of the NFL level, not just making a team. And people, he's awful raw for that. Well, sure enough, comes out, explodes on the scene as a rookie, but then falls off. And that's a difficult spot for a team. But I don't think the wait and see approach by Seattle is unwarranted in this particular case. They're basically saying, it's Missouri. I'm the show me state. Prove it to me. And if he does, he'll get rewarded and they'll be out a little bit more money, but they'll also have Reek playing at the top level, which is not something you can just go out and replicate.
What have you seen from the rookie Nick Emenwari so far? Have you seen enough to kind of put your finger on what you think he might be?
I really like the Nick Emenwari fit. Again, got to see him up close. We were on the field at the combine. I was right next to him during the vertical jump, and seeing a guy that big just kind of look like he's going to continue to go up is a crazy thing. Posted a tweet of that and sent it out, and people were like, that looks like an alien landed. And it's true. He's very tall, very fast.
It'd be a good nickname for him. You might have just come up.
Yeah, tremendously explosive, but a little bit raw. And, it's funny because ideally, I think they want him to play the Kyle Hamilton role from the Ravens. And people remember Kyle Hamilton was very highly drafted, end of the first round. Again, everybody said, oh, he slipped. There was a lot of talk about him as a top 10 player. And he came out and had a very pedestrian rookie season because they were asking him to do a lot and he was still developing. I think Kyle Hamilton was farther along when he came out than Nick Eamon-Wari was mentally as a football player in terms of football intelligence. And he still struggled in that first year. So I think we're going to be looking for flashes and we're going to be looking for familiarization. He's playing a similar role, but again, he's got farther to go. I do think he has a taller physical ceiling. I don't think that's a stretch at all, but it did take him to the second year until he really blossomed. So I think it's unfair to put a load of expectation on Nick Eamon-Wari, say you got to be the guy in that role in this year when he's got farther to go than even Kyle did. But give me the second year. I like, if I could fast forward, I don't want to skip the season for sure. But if I could fast forward to year 2 of Nick Eamon-Wari, I would be fascinated to see where he's at, because that's when the quote unquote light came on for Kyle Hamilton. Everybody went, oh my God. And now everybody wants one. That's the whole reason that the Hawks drafted Nick Eamon-Wari, is because they're like, if he gets there, he can play the Kyle Hamilton role. And you see what that guy's doing in that defense. He's an absolute agent of chaos. We want that. We need that. And if that bet pays off, it'll be huge for the Seahawks.
I feel like he's a little bit of or could be poster child for this coaching staff and their approach and what they do. It's almost a developmental quarterback approach they've taken with him, where a lot of organizations, especially you trade up to get a guy top of the second round, you're throwing him out there, sink or swim. Like, let's find out if you can play in this league. Whereas they're almost handling him with kid gloves. Like, they're only going to give him what they think he can succeed at now. And then the other stuff, the stuff that Kyle Hamilton was ahead of him with, like the deep third stuff, if you ever want to throw him back there as a center fielder, not exactly his game. And they're just easing him into that. We'll see some third team reps at that in practice from time to time, but they really are only going to give him what they think he can handle as a rookie. And I respect that. And we'll find out how much success they have at that. A lot of talk the last couple of days. Again, we were here a month ago and then it kind of died down. But now that the Bengals, well, the Bengals haven't made it known, but there's enough reporting around the league from people that we know are connected to know that the Bengals are serious now about trying to get some sort of compensation for Trey Hendrickson, that they just feel like they've reached about as far as they can go with their contract offer, and it's not what he's looking for. How do you feel about the potential fit here in Seattle and whether it would make sense for them?
Agnostic of gestures at everything else. Trey Hendrickson, the football player on the Seahawks defense, would be a transcendent add. He would be a force multiplier for this defense. We talked about at the top of this podcast. In terms of true blue chip players, Trey's there. Like, real easy. If you get to top 5 pass rushers in the NFL and you haven't said Trey Hendrickson's name, I'm going to stop you and say, okay, where's Trey go? Because he does go in that group. And that, when you have those players, as you well know, that have to be game planned for, have to be accounted for. And Trey's been doing it by himself. Like last year, he did it completely by himself in the Bengals. He was still that good and had no help. He would be coming into a Seahawks situation where he has lots of help. He has Leonard, he has Byron, he has, Spoon. He has all these guys around him. He's got Uchenna if he comes back. He's got all the young pass rushers. He's got Hall and Mafe, and like, oh my God, that's so many more pass rush weapons than the Bengals have had from a pure football perspective. Hell yes. Like, that would be so exciting. There's everything else. If so, what's the real cost? It'd be very expensive. And I'm not sure that the Bengals are where you said they are. Publicly, they're saying that they're closer to that, but I don't think they really do want to just let him go. And so I think their demands, as they were in the beginning with just the pure contract stuff, are unreasonable. And now, they came out and said, oh, we need a first round player and a young defender who's an edge, which you're never going to trade a young edge for an older edge that needs a contract. If they come to their senses, and I mean the Bengals, because I think Trey is completely justified in his approach. He has been a very good soldier for that team. He has done everything right. And now he is saying, look, at this point, you need to reward me for all my service. And he is correct, because he has delivered at the top level for all those promises for that team. What I think would be a reasonable meeting in the middle would be a quality young defender, not an edge. And the Seahawks have a bunch of those, and they have stacks of them in certain areas, specifically the secondary, where the Bengals could really use one. A round 2 pick. I don't think they're getting a round 1 pick for him, because the third piece, you got to pay him with a contract that is a top 3 edge with at least 2 years guaranteed, and he is on the other side of 30. Does that constitute a risk? Yes. Do you get top 5 players in the NFL at their position without taking risks? You do not. Like, that's just not a thing. So if you want to pay the piper, that's what it's going to take, probably in minimum, once the Bengals come around to that. And I think they'll come around to that fairly quickly when he starts holding out actual games during the season. Then it will be like, well, we just got to get what we can get and move on. This is a distraction, whatever else. And it may get to that point. Usually money talks, players back on the field, they come to some sort of a deal. That's what happens, I would say 75, 80% of the time. Trey seems pretty resolute that might not be the case here, because he certainly feels, disrespected, mistreated, whatever you want to say, and, could move on. And at that point, I think the deal will happen pretty quickly if a team's ready, and he would be transformative for the pass rush for the Seahawks.
There you have it, folks. Those of you who don't agree with that, EJ laid it on the line there. The other guy that's out there, that's a name that has I've kind of come and gone on whether he would make sense or not, is Jadeian Clowney. There's the clear connection there with the success that he had in Baltimore, kind of resurrected the back half of his career. He parlayed that 1 year into a 2-year contract, although he didn't see the second year of that contract in Carolina. But he's out there, and at varying degrees throughout this training camp and OTAs, I've thought he fit or didn't. Early in the process, I thought he and DeMarcus Lawrence were a bit redundant in their skill sets. But that was when we thought Uchenna Nwosu was going to be ready to go by the beginning of training camp. Then we get to training camp, and he didn't experience a setback, but the timeline was shifted forward. Now, Uchenna Nwosu has passed his physical and might even be ready week 1, if not week 1 shortly thereafter. And it sounds like they're really optimistic they're going to get a good version of him. Does Jadeian Clowney help this defensive roster at all? Does he make any sense?
It's tough. You mentioned Nwosu, and it's just another piece, because I think Uchenna and Jadeian Clowney are 2 different players physically. They play different roles, and Jadeian Clowney is a name at this point in his career that comes up for a lot of rosters at this point in the calendar every year. Hey, we could use.
He's the new Ndamukong Suh. He just doesn't want to practice. He doesn't want to go through camp, but hey, I'm here.
And I don't blame him at all for that at his particular age. The NFL is a tough gig. Clowney is a straight up pocket crusher at this point. Like, he is a heavy-handed edge setter. The one exception to that is, and he's been good at this since the beginning of his career, is move him inside on NASCAR packages on third down, have him stand over the snapping hand of the center and have him attack the snapping hand of the center. And he's pretty good at it. It's a move he's had in his club. He's had in his bag since he was a rookie. He can still do it, but outside, he's not going to create you, the pincher on the outside of the pass rush anymore. He is going to create you the ability to sort of set a pin in the ground and say he's not moving, crush the pocket a little bit. He doesn't have a lot of pass rush move left to him, but he is stout and he understands angles and how to play defense, and he is reliable, but he's not going to bring a lot of verve to your pass rush. He's a decent stunt player, more as the pick than the looper. That's pretty much what he is. And if you're really short on edges, like, for instance, Cincinnati could have used him last year because they just didn't have anything opposite Trey. But that's really the teams I think that are in the running for a Jadeian Clowney at this point are teams that are just bereft of pass rush. They're like, look, we just need another guy. Even without Nwosu coming back healthy, or if it was going to take a couple of weeks, I think there's enough young guys in this rotation that they'd really just be taking away snaps. Like Jadeian Clowney, I think, would be taking away snaps from guys like Mike Morris, who the Hawks clearly want to see more of and is developing in a way that they'd like. So I think they'd rather just leave Mike Morris on the field for those snaps, because Jadeian's a known at this point, and Mike Morris is still we're not sure. Has he hit his ceiling? Is there more there? And you're not going to see that if he's on the sideline, because you've got, the husk of Jadeian Clowney running around in your defense.
Yeah, I like that idea of opportunity cost. I think it applies to Riley Mills too. I know they love him, and whatever the ETA is on him, they said mid-season when he was drafted, but he's out there running full speed. We'll see when he comes back, but that's the role they envision for him. He's got to play inside and out. Appreciate that perspective. The one position that fans are still freaking out a little bit about is inside linebacker. And up until about a week ago, I've been the guy saying, hey, look, they like Drake Thomas more than you think. They like Patrick O'Connell more than you think. There's some other guys with some intrigue on that roster. Derek Jackson, the undrafted free agent out of Kentucky, has flashed. But Knight's kind of a mystery at this point. We love what we saw out of the combination of him and Ernest Jones last year. It kind of spearheaded the resurrection of that defense midseason. But, it's been about a week since Mike McDonald told us they're waiting for more information before they know where they stand on Knight. And it seems a little ominous if he should miss time. And I know we've seen the packages. We've seen Emin Wari play weak side linebacker. D'Anthony Bell can play that same role as well as kind of a hybrid safety. And I think he's going to be on this 53. Is that enough for you? Or do you think if Knight's going to have to potentially be placed on injured reserve, for example, that they might need to go get someone?
I would say they would be looking at cut downs if that happens. If that comes to pass, if Knight is placed on, if Knight's going to miss any time, if anybody's going to miss any time at inside linebacker, this team can afford like one-ish injury at inside linebacker, and that's it. And this is coming from an avowed Drake Thomas truther. Like I saw Drake Thomas at Shrine Bowl. Everybody's like, he's too short, he's too slow. I was like, and I went back and I watched his tape after I saw him at Shrine, and I was like, you're wrong. Like he was doing this in the ACC. He is better than you think. Yes, he is shorter and a tick slower, but mentally he's incredibly quick and he's really, really tough. Love Drake Thomas. But even so, like, does he bring you everything that Jones does? No, Jones is so important to this defense. And I think that's a story that's been told. Like they went out and got him because Mike Mack in his first half of last year said, I do not have what I need at linebacker to make my defense work. Go get me somebody. They get Jones. The defense transitions almost immediately, and you see how valuable he is in that role. So they kind of can't take an injury to Jones, but even if Knight's going to miss time, like Drake Thomas can come in. Does he give you the same things Knight does? No, Knight's on the other end of the spectrum. Bigger, hyper athletic, just serves a different role. So they're even going to kind of have to patch that together. And you said there are guys that can kind of moonlight coming forward from, playing the big dimebacker role, safety, whatever. They could do that if it's going to be a few weeks. If it's going to be more than that, Drake Thomas is really good and I love him dearly, but he's backup. And you don't want to play your backups if you don't have to. And then you're really treading on thin ground, even for the first month of the season. Say Jones twists an ankle. Now you're talking about Drake Thomas being your preeminent starter and still patching it together at the other opportunity. You need to probably grab somebody at the 53. And like you said, there are certain positions that are available at 53. Young pass rushers? No. Great young wide receivers with size and speed? No. Inside linebackers? Run stuffing defensive tackles? Yep. There's a few of those. You can find those guys around the league. So this is a real challenge for the pro scouting department. And to an extent, the college scouting department as well, because a lot of those guys are, maybe aren't just going to make the roster. So they've got very recent files on them to go find somebody that can fit in that other role opposite Jones and say, look, now we have two capable backups, one in Drake Thomas. He could come in and fill, 80% of what Jones does. And then we got to have somebody for Knight that's more athletic.
I love what you said about Drake Thomas. I was so stoked when we sniped him essentially from the Raiders when they tried to pass him through to the practice squad his rookie year. The video of me reacting to that is still the highest clocking video on my channel in its history. So
let's go.
Thomas has a special place in my heart.
He's a hell of a football player. He is mean as a football player. And one thing I think that people don't or really underestimate about his game, he's not a pass rusher because of his size and his alignment, but he is a vicious blitzer. And the way he takes on and stacks and sheds blocks is teaching tape. Like he's so technically sound. He's so good. He's so much fun to watch in practice. I've got a little more time to spend with you. And so I want to flip back to the offensive side of the ball because there's a couple of things I want to pick your brain about. I'm fascinated by how this running back timeshare might look. We have seen how good Kenneth Walker can be. We have seen moments of how good Zach Charbonnet can be. We've rarely seen them used together in any capacity. They're rarely healthy at the same time.
the questions about Kenneth Walker coming into the season were pretty widespread and obvious, and they were shared by me. And that was just, does he fit this scheme instinctively? Like his style of play, does it match wide zone? Can he be decisive enough, stick his foot in the ground, pick a lane, and go? That hasn't been his game. Maybe some of that's by necessity, but I always wonder about just that muscle memory and those instincts kind of being broken. It happens with running backs sometimes. When he's been on the field during training camp, in practice, he has been the best player on the field, in my view, from all the practices that I've attended. But he hasn't been on the practice field every day. And in fact, this week is the first time he's practiced back-to-back practices. Now, they weren't back-to-back days because they went to Top Golf in between with the day off. But in the games, we have seen how good Zach Charbonnet does fit, and can be in this offense. I have used the analogy that it could very much look like what the Lions have done the last couple of years with Montgomery and Gibbs. It could be that kind of duo. Is that what you foresee, or do you think the Seahawks are just feeding us a bunch of BS and they're keeping him under wraps, and really the plan is to unleash Kenneth Walker week 1?
I think it's a little bit of both. The Hawks absolutely want to unleash what K-Walk is in this offense, because he has been very good. I would say borderline special when he's been on the field. But it's going to be a timeshare for sure, not because of any particular limitation in either back, but because that's what most NFL backfields are. I think it's one of the most persistent myths is that there's bell cow backs in the NFL. There just aren't anymore. There's not. Even the Derrick Henrys of the world, if you look at their overall carry share, has declined, and Derrick Henry might be at the top of being that singular back, right? And he's just not anymore, and neither is anybody else around the league. It is your top 2 and really your top 3. Your third is usually your third down back, and the other 2 are your interchangeable starters. Now, that might be a 60-40 split. It's not typically a 50-50 split. Might be as much as a 70-30, but 30 is still a really good percentage of the runs. So Charbonnet is and has been good. I've been a proponent of his since pre-draft. I got to see him practice down at UCLA a couple of times, and I was like, that's a dude. That guy's going to play in the league for sure. Very different runner than K-Walk, but that's fine because you do have that variety of approaches and styles that challenge a defense. But when Kenneth Walker's been on the field and been healthy, and those are both whens and ifs, and Seahawks fans are well acquainted with all that, his missed tackle force rate is special. Like twice as many missed tackles forced as Charbonnet did. Now, their effectiveness, Charbonnet runs differently. He runs through more tackles than K-Walk does, but K-Walk is a special player. If you get him on the boundary in outside zone and he makes one guy miss, and he typically does. In college, I said it was the second move for Kenneth Walker that made me the most impressed. His first move was always good, but then he had a second move that was ridiculous. And if you make 2 guys miss on a run fit in the NFL, you're going to the house. There are not 4 unaccounted for defenders just roaming around waiting for you. You make 2 of those guys miss on outside zone, you're picking up an explosive play at least, if not 6 points. So that's what the Hawks want for Kenneth Walker. And the blocking, as we talked about at the very, very top of the show, is supposed to be better. If his health and that blocking come together, he could have a special season. Will he still share carries? Yes, and that's a good thing for Kenneth Walker, to keep extra hits and wear and tear off his body. Use Zach Charbonnet, who is not a downgrade. He's just a different style in terms of his effectiveness. It was very similar to Kenneth Walker last year in terms of yards per carry and many other metrics, efficiency, success rate. He even had more explosives than K-Walk did last year in a similar number of carries, because he just does it differently. So is that a bad thing? No, Hawks fans should celebrate. I know a lot of people, oh, what are we doing picking Zach Charbonnet? We just picked Kenneth Walker. Like, no, you need 2, and now you have 2 good ones.
It was hard not to watch what happened against the Chiefs on Friday night and think, those holes that George Holani and Zach Charbonnet were getting, that Walker houses those.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the difference.
And, shout out to Kennedy Palomalu, right, as the running backs coach, because honestly, they have 3 guys behind them that nobody knows the name of that could all be the 2 or the 3. And that is rare depth for the NFL.
I said it on Twitter the other day. I said, whoever, whatever criticisms y'all might have for John Schneider, like his eye for running backs, like even Jacardier Wright looked like a guy that could start in this league. And we saw that from Kenny McIntosh before he got hurt, and, you know, finding Helani in undrafted free agency. Yeah, they know how to fight, and they all look the same. When you see them on the practice field, you're like, okay, they're going to be 5'10" to 6 foot, 215 to 220. They're all going to be really sturdy from the waist down. Like, they have a type. Yeah, absolutely. Let's say he does go out and have a massive year with all the other decisions facing the Seahawks next year, but with top 5, top 6 cap flexibility this year and next year as well. Can they justify paying Ken Walker what the market bears, given the depth in that room and some of the other needs that they'll have next year in the offseason?
They can, as you said, in terms of cap flexibility. Can is absolute. Should they is a different question. And
it's tricky.
As difficult, huge Kenneth Walker fan. He's my RB1 the year he came out. Loved his game. And look, I would still probably say no. Running back is a fungible position in the NFL. Yeah. And you've seen very good organizations in the NFL, specifically in the NFC. I'm talking about the Eagles and Howie Roseman, get very good players to the end of their first contract and say, we've got very good players behind him. As we just said, that depth with Kennedy Palomalo coaching them up, you know, who are very inexpensive. All the players you named are cheap and younger. And you say, hey, Kenneth, go for it. And you take the comp pick, right? Kenneth Walker leaves your team. Somebody else has to deal with his days off at this particular point. You've still got Charbonnet as a lead back. You shuffle guys in, or again, take that money and flexibility, draft another guy in round 2 or round 3 where you can find very good running backs. And you say, we're just going to keep this thing rolling. We're not going to tie up a whole bunch of money, because then if the worst happens, you give him a bunch of guaranteed money. He turns his ankle in week 1. He's not back till week 10 or something. That's a huge percentage of your cap tied up in somebody that's not contributing, as opposed to saying, hey, I have 3 or 4 young options that are, a fifth of the cost combined, but all of them are going to be available and give me, like you said, they're going to look the same when they get in the game for the most part, and get 80% of the production for 20% of the cost. That's a no-brainer in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the James Cook contract is relevant, and I think that's sort of the litmus test and the question you have to ask yourself. He has a big year. Are you willing to give him 30 million guaranteed? Are you willing to give him 4 for 48? If your running back room's empty, yeah, probably.
Oh, for sure.
When you run an offense and you have a philosophy of running the football, and that you've stated that that's important to you, and now you've demonstrated that with how you've gone about executing it. It might even be a situation. I'll take it one step further, EJ. They might not even get a comp pick, because I think with some of that cap flexibility, they might be fairly active in free agency, active enough to nullify some of that. And so it's not that simple. But I just think it's the cost of doing business in the NFL. And I know fans out there would lose their shit if they just let him walk. Sometimes it's the best thing to do. And I would even argue that that's almost the mark of, like, when you've arrived as a talented roster, when you have to let some of those guys go. Bill Belichick said it many years ago. It's better to let them go a little too early than too late. And sometimes it just makes more sense if you have alternatives behind them. Yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be one of the most fascinating storylines of the next 12 months when it comes to the Seahawks.
Yeah, you have to do both, right? You have to let them go, but you also have to get production, because if you let them go and you don't, you'll rightly hear about it from fans. But if you let them go and the fans complain, and then, whoever you bring in, whether it's free agency or your young guys ascending, perform at a very solid level, they might grumble, but it quiets down real quick.
This has been terrific. I'm so glad we got to have you on the show and that you were able to take some time out of your schedule. Where do you guys stand? Are you finished now with the team previews, or where's bootleg football heading into this? We're week 0 next week, right? Isn't that what we call it?
Yeah, we're getting there for sure. That's a term we pirated from college, but yes, indeed. No, we are done recording as of right before this podcast. We recorded the very last one, which is our Philadelphia Eagles preview. Just worked out that way in the schedule. It's not necessarily because they won the Super Bowl, but it was fun that it worked out that way. That will publish at the end of this week. And then as soon as next week, we're back on sort of the regular schedule of bringing you recaps and really catching up on everything that's happened in the preseason, because we are so head down doing the entire summer preview series an episode for all 32 teams, plus Patreon only episodes for, division recaps at the end of the week. That a lot of things happen in camp news that we just we see, but we don't really have a way to sort of react or report on it. So we'll have a sort of clearinghouse episode next week where we talk about a lot of those big storylines and major things that have gone on in camp. And then, we've only got a couple of weeks until we're into the regular season grind.
And just in case we have some closet Chicago Bear fans that tune into this episode,
for sure,
tell the folks about that as well.
Yeah, so Bear Era is my podcast that focused on the Chicago Bears. We're heading the second year on Bear Era. We've got some really good guests lined up for early in the season, but that's once a week. We sort of hit it in the middle of the week before, we can recap the previous week's game and talk about, storylines and opponents coming up, usually for about 40, 45 minutes. But, the Hawks and the Bears, they have links, right? The Metcalfs. Bobby Ingram was a star for both teams. There's some
Bobby Ingram had one of the great wide receiver years in Seahawks history.
One of my all-time favorites, and now currently a wide receiver coach in the NFL. So that's the kind of thing you'll pick up if you watch the summer preview series.
Darrell Taylor still on the roster?
No, they let him go this year.
Who did he latch on with?
Great question. I read it just a second ago, but there's 32 teams, so I can't remember which one it was. But was it Washington? Might have been Washington. Anyway,
one question before you go. How do you see the NFC West shaking out?
Oh, great question. I think the Seahawks take it, and that I believe I said that in our wrap-up episode because they had it last year, and I think the fact that the way they lost it in Mike Mack's rookie year, he is. Have you met Mike?
Yeah.
I got the chance to meet him, and he is a fantastic guy, and he is the furthest thing from ego. I was sort of standing next to him in a bar in the combine, and I said, well, now or never. He's not really talking to anybody. So I turned around and introduced myself. We talked, and while we were talking, one of the guys he was with about 5 guys, said, hey, Mike, what do you want to drink? And he was like, I don't know, beer. And it was the most honest thing. It was not some foofy drink, not some particular brand, just beer, right? Just give me a beer. And that is Mike Mack in a nutshell. And I think he really wanted to. He would never say it. He really wanted to win the division as a rookie. And he was right there. And they got pipped at the line, as we all know, by the Rams. Mm-hmm. I think that burns him. And again, people forget. They're like, whoa, they didn't win it. They were literally right there. We're talking about tiebreakers. And I don't think he's going to
tiebreaker or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't think he's letting up this year. I think he learned his lesson. Like, you cannot let off the gas until it is done. Like, we are across, the engine is shut down, and the checkered flag is waved, and he is going to push the pedal, the absolute firewall, and through it this year. And I think they're going to rage. I think as long as it comes together, they're going to be, they almost did it last year with all the troubles on defense in the first half of the year, all the struggles on the offensive line, literally the worst offensive line in the NFL, and they still almost won it.
Yeah.
It's hard not to look at them and say they're the preeminent favorites. I think the other teams in the division are fascinating, but I think at this point they're probably chasing. And some people might say I'm early on that. I think I'm right on time.
Yeah, I thought the Rams were the class of the division all throughout the offseason, but this Matt Stafford thing is not nothing. It's, I'm at that age where I know how much back pain can impact your life.
Yeah.
And but I don't try to play NFL football with it either, and that just doesn't sound like something that just goes away and you're good. That's just something to keep monitoring, and if he does go down, I think it changes the entire profile of their team. I think you came up with the title for this video today. I think they're going to rage. I think that we're going to go with that.
That's awesome. I love it.
That'll be a fun thumbnail to build as well. EJ, thank you so much. Bootleg Football. Catch up again sometime during the season. I would love that.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk Hawks.
Seahawks are on their way to Green Bay today, where they will take part in a joint practice against the Packers tomorrow. Full contact, full pads. Mike McDonald has stated and made it clear that he will play the starters extensively. He views that as the last best chance to see them in full contact action, and then they will be shut down for Saturday's game against the Packers. It'll be It'll be the guys fighting for roster spots for the most part. So we should know in the next 48 hours or so official confirmation of what that starting offensive line looks like. I still expect it to be Jaylen Sundell at center and Anthony Bradford at right guard, and then maybe we'll get some clarity on the Dalton Risner situation. Wrote about that on Substack, by the way, if you're wondering why there wasn't a reaction video to it, so check it out. That Substack is free through the first week of the regular season. It won't turn subscriptions on until week 2. And I touch on the idea that maybe he doesn't get signed until after that first game, when you don't have to guarantee veteran salaries. Now, some of that might depend on his demand. There are other interested suitors. He met with the Bengals yesterday. He's reportedly expected to meet with the Steelers after leaving here. I still believe Bradford has shown enough to be the starter at right guard. The concern is the depth. And Risner's a guy that played primarily on the left side throughout most of his career, played right guard, though, for the Vikings last year, and had a pretty typical year. Much better pass blocker than run blocker. In some respects, I think that makes me question the fit a little bit, but he's a guy with familiarity with Justin Outen and Clint Kubiak, as we talked about with EJ, and so we might be hearing more on that shortly. And then the cut down to 53 happens on Wednesday, and so stay tuned, because between Sunday and Wednesday, there's going to be a lot of movement around the league as teams try to maneuver and shift some of the things on their roster without the risk of losing guys through waiver claims. You will see some trades between Sunday and Wednesday. It wouldn't surprise me if the Seahawks are involved in something like that as they get proactive about their final 53-man roster. I will do my final 53-man projection Saturday after the football game. I'll react to the game, and then I'll do my 53-man roster reaction after that in a separate live stream so that you all can jump in and give me feedback and your thoughts on that as well. Until then, follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever, and be sure to subscribe once again to the YouTube channel. Hit that thumbs up if you like the video. Forever and always, go Hawks. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, EJ, for being on the show. Thank you, Blue Wire Network, who we're both a part of, for everything that you do. Until tomorrow, we'll see you.